Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K106 and the winner is Episode 6 of Book 1 Air. And yeah, mid-season finale, we're halfway through the first season and it's a really good episode. Obviously this is where the plot really kicks into gear. We very much move away from any sort of focus on pro bending after this. It's all about dealing with more or less the aftermath of Amon's big move in this episode. So it's a turning point for the season as it becomes much more focused, and we get to really kind of see what the reaction is, how all these kind of political maneuverings kind of add together. Because this episode isn't just about the pro bending, isn't just about Amon. We also get some very important stuff with regards to Tarlok and Lin and the kind of maneuverings going on there. So it's a very good episode just because it covers a lot of ground. This is the episode where I think people begin to really care about Lin as a character, whereas before this I think at least I've always found it difficult to like Lin prior to this episode, just because one, she hasn't been in the show that much before this point, and the few times we have seen her, outside of her just us knowing that she's Toph's daughter, she hasn't really given us much reason to like her, because she's been very against Korra and just very abrasive, as she kind of says about herself in this episode. So on that front, it's a very successful episode because it's a super important Lin episode, and then the plot stuff is important as well. But where we begin is with, obviously we're training. The immediate thing we're dealing with is that the pro bending tournament finals are coming up. The Firefights versus the Wolfbats, and the final training session basically before that. And they're confident, even though they know how amazing their opponents are, that they can beat them. But the problem is that they sort of seem to set it up that maybe Korra is a bit too angry at Tano. Maybe that could lead to their downfall in the match if she gets too angry at Tano. But as we see, she very much has kind of has that planned out, as we'll get to. But over the radio we get Amon ordering the council to cancel the pro bending tournament, that given that he's all about this inequality between the different the benders and non-benders, why should we continue to have a tournament that basically glorifies benders be this huge thing? So to get his power across, he demands that they cancel it, or he'll act, basically. And immediately, I think you can tell by Korra the fact that she immediately goes to the council. She knows they're going to make the wrong decision in her mind, and this is obviously where she and Lin begin to see eye to eye. And it's a really cool scene because obviously the whole team goes to the council and they make their case for why pro bending, the tournament, should be allowed to continue. And again, you see the key players of Tenzin kind of just wanting to protect the citizens. In this case, Tarlok is actually for shutting down the pro bending arena, because I think at the moment it's the right thing to do. He sort of knows that something bad will happen if they go ahead with it, but it's not until Lin makes her entrance that he turns around, because he sees it as okay, we'll overall take a loss, but it will be a loss that will basically be taken fully by Lin if we let her take the lead on this protection of this event. So Tarlok's political maneuverings here are very interesting to see, especially with obviously what happens next, which is he obviously gets the chief of police that he wants into power, so his task force basically becomes the police force of the city, and that gives him the power he needs to really shut down Korra, which obviously sets up episode 8 and onwards of what needs to happen. So as I said before, the plotting, the general plot of book 1 is really well done, because you really see how everything builds up. There's so many important scenes that don't seem important at the time but become very important later on. So Tarlok wanting to get rid of Lin, who is seen as a very strong chief of police, that there's basically no reason to get rid of her. She's doing an amazing job and she's extremely well respected. And this episode, I think, getting that across work so well as well. So the turnaround from Tarlock is definitely the most interesting part of that scene. I think as well as Mako, Bolin, and Korra presenting the positive side of pro bending, in that it's not just that they want to win the tournament so they don't want it to be cancelled. They present the idea that no, that this is something that non-benders and benders like, that the equalists don't speak for every non-bender. There are still non-benders who attend the tournaments and they still like this sport. Trying to say that this is like this negative thing in the city is not really true, because it's for everyone. And while yes, only benders can participate, people still want to watch it because it's a fun sport. So I kind of like that in a way, in that I would assume they don't go into it, but that Amon probably, obviously furthered the support of the people he has on his side, but probably actually turned a somewhat decent amount of non-benders against him because they like pro bending and he wants to get rid of it. So there's that. But after that, I suppose the main thing is we get the scene where we begin to, I suppose, characterize Lin a bit more, but also Tenzin with the history. And this relates to what Pema was talking about in the previous episode, and that is that the person Tenzin was dating before Pema got together with Tenzin was Lin. And we get that confirmed here by Korra figuring it out, and then Tenzin going overboard with the explanation of it here. And I think it's really, really interesting in that he mentions that Aang and Lin actually got along really, really well. I would have loved to have seen that, and I think that's just in general something a lot of fans want to see. They want to see all of the previous characters interacting with like the children of the other characters, just to see what all those different new dynamics are like. So that was a cool thing. And then just finding out that they were together until Pema kind of got in the way, and Tenzin very bluntly just says that Lin tried to have Pema arrested for this. That's how kind of serious it got, which explains, I suppose, some of why Lin is so abrasive, as she says, and just kind of anti-Tenzin. And so you get the impression that she's sort of taking some of that out on Korra, because Korra is associated with Tenzin. But it was a fun thing to just get that connection that like Tenzin had some kind of romance little issues before he kind of settled down with Pema. And the explanation that he sort of, it's almost like this joke that he's kind of trailing off, but it is interesting and kind of fits what's going on here, and that he basically says, I think what they basically imply here is just that Tenzin wanted kids more or less as soon as possible, I suppose in part to make sure that the airbenders would continue, and Lin, obviously being chief of police, or maybe not quite chief of police at the time, I wanted to focus more on her career, and that's why he says their lives were heading in different directions. So I think that's one of those ones where it kind of makes sense of just like he very much wanted kids to continue on his nation and stuff like that, and because of that, like, it was such an important thing to him, and I suppose Lin's career was important to her, that they just kind of couldn't be together. So while it might have been like a dramatic breakup, it was one that was kind of almost inevitable and was going to happen anyway. And I think that the thing that they set up here is that it's just something they haven't really addressed or talked about as much since, so there is still some tension between the two of them that we get here, and it's sort of resolved, I think, in the very nice scene between the two, as we start the searching around the pro bending arena just before the match starts. As Tenzin's just like, for once, could we just kind of get along here? I have to be here to support Korra and be there if she gets into any trouble. Could we please just have like one kind of nice kind of moment together here? And I like that she kind of softens a bit here and just has a moment of like, yes, like, I don't need to be consistently angry at you. In this case, it is quite serious. It would be better to have you on my side than against you in this case. So I think that was just a nice scene showing the kind of maturity level that, I think for the most part, Lin has moved on past this, and it was just a case of having the two of them just talk together that kind of gets them past it. And after that, I suppose the pro bending match basically starts from here, and I think what's so good about this pro betting match is like some of the other ones, it gives you more of the rules. Through the Wolfbats breaking the rules, we get the explanation of stuff that you can't do in pro betting and the limitations on it. Because I think that's the one thing they haven't particularly been clear with up to now, is that okay, like there's these zones and you get pushed back, you can't go forward, you can't just do any sort of bending you want. But they specify a little bit more clearly here that waterbenders can't just like continuously like hose someone down with waterbending. That there's a limit, that you can only basically throw enough water at someone to where they're consistently getting soaked for like about a second. You can't do earth or fire headshots. Waterbenders aren't allowed to use ice. It seems like for the most part you're not allowed to mix the elements together in any sort of a way. So like you can't, like as they sort of do here, like crush up the earth, coat it in water, and then fire it at people. And I assume it's similar with the other stuff, where like you can't basically fire up the water to make steam and then fire that at your opponent. For one, because that would primarily hurt someone, whereas the aim is to knock them back. So a lot of these kind of more different moves wouldn't actually be of any use in what's going on here. But it just kind of showed that, like, oh wait, here's actually this other side of things, whereas Mako, Bolin and all are presenting the positive side of this. Here's the fact that here is clear cut, like, cheating, that there is corruption within pro bending, that nothing seems to be done about, and no one is particularly aware of it, that even the commentator is just like, we just have to accept that this is going on here, we're not going to make any move to kind of step in and get in the way of this. It's just, you know, the referees are paid off and it's just something that has to be accepted. And I think this kind of gives Amon a point. Of course, when he comes in and gives his speech, he references this very clearly, of just the fact that, you know, you support cheaters here, basically. Your 4-time champions are cheaters. Have they ever won a single tournament themselves, or was it all through cheating? That's, I think, an interesting point to add nuance to what's happening here. But I think the thing is that I think some of the choreography in this fight shows that the Wolfbats are good. If they just had a straight up fight with the Fire Ferrets, it would have been fairly even anyway. I think they managed to get across this action scene well enough that it makes it clear that I think the Fire Ferrets on just pure skill would have won this tournament. But they would have been pushed hard. It would have been a somewhat fair fight, in that in round 2, when the Ferrets managed to, for the most part, neutralize most of the cheating or make amend, you know, get through it, they basically fight the Wolfbats to a draw, and maybe that would have happened if, you know, they just had a fair fight. But it's the final round, and when I suppose Tano goes for what is, I suppose, their ultimate cheating move of just to crush up rocks in the water, there's kind of no counter to that. If you get hit, you're KO'd and knocked out immediately. But I thought it was really cool because I think they put a lot of animation effort into the choreography in this pro bending match. There's a lot of really cool flips. There's this amazing moment where Tano kind of runs up one of the, I suppose, turnbuckles, basically, does a kind of backflip kind of twist while dodging an attack, leading into an attack of his own. You see the other 2 members of the Wolfbats kind of like cartwheel over each other to dodge attacks. You have Bolin firing an earth disc off the kind of off the ropes to get a hit on someone. And as well as that, you just have the fact that this has actually been a fight that's been set up. There's been a little bit of a character moment here of the feud between Korra and Tano, of him kind of knowing that he's getting to her, and her very much presenting the fact that she's annoyed at him. So when it gets to the one-on-one tiebreaker, you can tell that he's like, I'm going to goad her into going all out. I'll dodge her really obvious kind of blunt attack and then counter-attack. But Korra, you can tell she was sort of leading him astray with all of this, in that she just does what he expects to do, and that's just fire a really obvious punch, but at the same time just kicks her leg up while she's staring at him right in the eyes and just KOs him immediately, and she just completely played him, which I thought was a really, really fun moment just to kind of give Tano in the middle of the match that comeuppance. But in the end, the cheating pays off and the Wolfbats win. But again, they transition very nicely with all of these scenes. directly into the fire ferrets are knocked out, so that's why they're not right there in the middle of everything with Amon. Whereas as they're celebrating, that's when Amon comes in and uses the champions as a perfect, example to everyone in the biggest event in the city that everyone is involved in. The chamber of pro bending within the entire, the beacon of pro bending, of bending in the city, within the entire city, takes away the bending of the champions in front of everyone. It's a huge statement, and especially with the speech that he gives about how, benders have an unnatural advantage. That's not the case anymore. Our planning has led to this technology, and now with this technology, a non-bender effectively has the power of a bender within their hands, and that's the shock gloves that we see here, as well as just, I suppose, the other weaponry that the Equalists tend to use. And then you have Amon, who is, I suppose, continuing the trend that the spirits have given him this ability to take bending away. And just, he is presented as being so powerful, and just in terms of what he's trying to do, of present this kind of threat to all benders, it works so well that he's able to just, come across this way, because he's such a good speaker. The points that he's making, while maybe, over-exaggerating some things, is valid, and you can see why people are drawn to him and why he's gathered such a following, and why back in episode 4 he didn't take out Korra is because of this. He was waiting to get the Equalists as big as they are here to then make their move, and again, what a move it is. He just comes in, takes out the champs, nearly takes out the fire ferrets as well. The lieutenant primarily deals with them and captures them down below, which keeps Korra out of most of the action. And then as he goes to leave, the bombs are set off, and just pretty incredible that in a Nickelodeon show we're just allowed to just go full on like terrorist bombing of the pro bending arena here as everything's falling apart. As well as that, I suppose, just the craziness of the fact that like half of the crowd suddenly get up and are revealed to have their weapons like in their popcorn and stuff like that. It's a really well done scene to just get across like the underground sort of nature of this, that here's an event where we're allowing benders and non-benders in. What if most of the non-benders are now equalists? And that's exactly what's happening here. And you can see that a lot of the technology is built in a way where it directly counters Lynn's police force members of like using electricity against people who primarily use metal. You can see where the problem's going to be. But with regards to, I suppose, Tano getting his bending taken away, I like that he stands up for himself. I like that they just fight for themselves, to defend themselves. Which again is something that Bolin didn't even do back in episode 3. He didn't defend himself, but Tano, who you almost think is potentially somewhat of a coward, actually steps up and fights. He gets taken out and shows a little bit of cowardice at the end of just like, I'll give you all the money and just don't take my bending away. But it shows how important his bending is to him. He's a pro bending athlete. This is obviously how he makes his money. He kind of is nothing without it as well, and it shows the impact that's going on here. And it also shows, I suppose, the very negative side of the equalist of like, yes, the bending is something that non-benders don't have. It's like a special thing that benders have, but it's not something they specifically chose to have. If you have it, why not use it? And while of course, you're always going to have to present the idea of what do the people who don't have it do, taking away this special thing that someone does have and they never chose to have, what are you actually like accomplishing here? In that I think they're obviously trying to go for the idea of, very much leaning into the idea that all benders are the kind of higher ups in the city and all non-benders are the lower in the city. But that's not the case, as we know. Like Hiroshi, non-bender, owner of the biggest company. Lao Ganlan, similarly. Butaka, who runs the pro bending, we don't know if he's a bender or not, but just because he doesn't really seem to like have bending, you'd almost assume that he's not a non-bender. He runs pro bending. The guy who runs pro bending is not a bender himself. Like that in itself is something. I don't think all the council members at this point are benders. in that they maybe allude to it, because we know Tenzin and Tarlok are, of course, but we don't know if the others are. But they don't really ever specifically say if they are or not. Just that, in general, benders have all these high positions. So I think it's maybe one of the slight weaknesses of Book 1, in that they never, I think, go as far as I think they need to fully get Amon's point across of just, like, exactly specifically what are you talking about here. Because I think they almost should have leaned a little bit harder into, like, the triads. It's all about the triads. They're the real problem that he's dealing with, but he almost seems to forget about them after this point. Because he takes out Lightning Bolt Zolt, it feels like that's just the triads eliminated, when they really are, I suppose, represent the problem. But I suppose this is where we kind of have to bring in the fact that Amon isn't necessarily all about what exactly he's talking about. A lot of this is just the rhetoric required to get people on his side, whereas his point is just, I suppose, a very personal reason for why he doesn't like bending, and why I suppose he ends up being a hypocrite with regards to why the situation of the fact that he is a bender and he's doing all of this, in that he doesn't necessarily care about non-bender inequality. He just cares about getting rid of benders, and I suppose potentially that's why a lot of the points he makes are very general and not specific. But as I said, I think there's just enough presented here where, like, you get what they're going for here, that okay, yeah, there is inequality, but it's probably not as bad as you'd think, just because a lot of the main business people are seem to be non-benders, and then the benders seem to pursue more kind of active roles that, like, require them to use their bending, whether that be becoming athletes or working at the plant or something like that, construction work, that sort of stuff. So, you know, that's obviously something I think they could explore a little bit later on. I suppose it's potentially something a reference book style release, if they ever did that, could explain to us just exactly, like, which roles in the city benders primarily have versus non-benders. Because I almost feel like the way to go here would have been to actually have a president installed already rather than a council, and have the president be a bender and then use that as a big counterpoint. But because you have a council of, like, 5 people, and then you basically only characterize 2 of them, and then even then you don't necessarily go in depth with the other 3 to even explain if they're a bender or not, it kind of becomes a problem. But, and I suppose this is maybe where you'd want Amon to maybe specifically mention Tarlok specifically as someone who represents kind of, like, benders above non-benders. But because I suppose he has to know, of course, that Tarlok is his brother, whereas Tarlok doesn't know that Amon is his brother, maybe from Amon's perspective, him mentioning Tarlok too soon would have maybe given the game away. But that's, I suppose, just how a lot of the later plot links into what's going on here. But still, just the movement that he makes here really has this kind of changing kind of effect on the series, of, like, all of a sudden the Equalists are fully in play. Any member of the Equalists now has the ability to basically take down any bender, and Amon can take away bending at will. The center point of the city at this point has been taken out, and what are we going to do? That the benders have lost this battle completely here, and the only benefit that's really come out of it is that Korra and, like, Lin are kind of on the same team. You know, they're willing to team up, which is obviously when Korra and the Firefighter kind of jump back into action. I suppose it's an interesting one of just, like, why do Mako and Bolin not necessarily do anything to help? But I suppose at the time they're freed, most of the people who've been knocked out and the rest of the Equalists have kind of done what they need to do, and they're primarily just focused on escaping. So they're not really required to do anything, whereas Korra directly wants to go after Amon, and Lin helps her, which, you know, this is, I suppose one of the net benefits of this episode is during the pro bending match, Lin notes to Tenzin that, like, I can't believe your, like, good-natured father, like, his reincarnation is this kind of girl who's tough as nails. And Lin actually, like, just seeing Korra in the pro bending arena is like, wow, I didn't know she was like this. She's very, very impressive. She likes what she sees. And then, just the point of Tenzin noting that, like, you're actually fairly similar in some ways. Like, you'd probably get along if you gave her the opportunity. And she gives her that opportunity by helping her out. Korra goes for the big water spout move to get up to Amon. She falls. Lin kind of sends her flying up there with really cool kind of use of kind of both of her kind of metal wires. And then, yeah, this fight scene is just, I think it has to be one of the best in book one. And I think, arguably, like, looking back on the entire series, it is one of the better fights as well. Just because it's got a great atmosphere to it of just with what just happened, what potentially could happen if, they get to where they need to in this fight. And then just, I suppose, the location as well, that here we are right on the top of the pro bending arena. It's just some metal kind of structure, and then it's glass. Any big impacts on the glass are going to crack it. They'll fall through, and it's a huge drop down to the water or the pro bending arena if you hit it. And then you have, like, Amon's kind of airship there as well, kind of still on the verge of kind of getting away. And it's just Lin and Korra against, like, the lieutenant and all the chi blockers, because Amon's not really getting involved in the fight. You get to see how, I suppose, casual Amon is, knowing that, like, certain bending won't hit him, as he just casually walks into the airship as the fire just kind of comes up through the kind of trapdoor kind of area. And yeah, the fight between Korra and the lieutenant here is really well choreographed. You can see that whenever there's any sort of a distance, the lieutenant has to run away from Korra because he doesn't have any ranged attacks. The second it gets in close, Korra has to be very careful because she could be knocked out by the electricity with any sort of a quick blow. But Korra's not helpless up close, so she has to kind of alter how quick her firebending and so on is up close. And she eventually gets the victory over the lieutenant and just sends him flying off the arena, and it becomes this sort of humorous thing over the next couple of episodes, but just the amount of times the lieutenant gets defeated and he just gets wrecked in how he gets defeated. This is the second time in the series that this has happened to the lieutenant. In episode 3, Korra smashes him into the wall with that earthbending attack, and he looks like he's, like, ruined, basically. And here's another case of him just being sent flying off the pro bending arena. We'll see it happen again over the next couple of episodes, just the abuse the lieutenant takes, but it shows, I suppose, how he keeps coming back. I suppose that's one thing, but he is a really good kind of fighter. We get to see Lin, who obviously is an earthbender and a metal bender, up on the roof with no earth, how she just fights people with just the whips that she has, and it's, again, very impressive as you see, like, this cool sort of fighting where, like, they have bolos and they're all using kind of, like, stringed kind of weaponry. And it just shows how impressive she is, that it's a very different style of metal bending than, like, Toph's, but later on we'll get to see Lin use more kind of Toph style bending. And of course, the result is that Amon gets away, and they've more or less kept the damage to a minimum, but the pro bending arena has been destroyed. The media is going to report on this. The big takeaway from this is that, they've suffered a bad defeat, and Lin is going to take a lot of the flack for this because she promised she'd keep everyone safe, and if the metal bending cops for the most part were not particularly effective, and Tano and the Wolfbats have had their bending taken away, and they're now an even bigger threat in the city than ever. That they are now actively going to go after benders, and who knows when they could hit at any point. And we're going to have to figure out now, begin the investigation of who manufactured their equipment for them, and how that relates to other certain characters. And of course, next week we're going to see Asami come into play in a particularly important episode, but we'll get to that next week. But yeah, that's been my review for episode 6. In my opinion, an amazing episode of the show, excellent mid-season finale, and just very strong episode for Lin. The pro bending match itself I thought was well done. It's also the last, I suppose, for this season we see of pro bending, and just, yeah, a very, very important episode in terms of shifting the series to focus now more on the Equalist. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.